She thought it was just another shift at the hospital, long hours and endless patience. But then she met one man, frail and fading, who whispered his final wish. No one could have imagined how far this Virginia nurse would go to grant it. Stay with me right to the end, because this story will move you in ways you never expected. Before we dive in, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and comment below where in the world you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Rebecca Martinez had been working at Richmond General Hospital for 7 years. At 29, she was one of the most respected nurses on the cardiac unit. Her colleagues knew her as the one who never missed a detail, never forgot a medication time, and never left a patient feeling alone. She had this quiet way of moving through the halls, checking on everyone, making sure they felt seen. Most nights, she worked the evening shift from 3 to 11. She preferred it that way. The hospital was calmer then. Fewer doctors rushing around. Fewer visitors crowding the hallways. It gave her more time to really talk to her patients, to sit with them when they were scared or lonely. But Tuesday, October 15th started differently. Rebecca was asked to cover the overnight shift for a colleague who had fallen ill. She didn't mind. She'd done night shifts before, though not in months. The hospital at night was a different world entirely. Quieter, more intimate, but also more intense. People faced their deepest fears in those dark hours between midnight and dawn. As she walked through the cardiac unit at 11:30 that evening, Rebecca checked her patient list. Room 314 had a new admission. Thomas Henley, 67 years old, admitted with end-stage heart failure. The chart showed he'd been transferred from another hospital downstate. No family listed as emergency contacts. No visitors noted since his arrival that afternoon. Rebecca knocked softly on the door to room 314 before entering. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the heart monitor and the soft light from the hallway. Thomas was awake, staring out the window at the city lights below. "Good evening, Mr. Henley," Rebecca said gently. "I'm Rebecca, your nurse for tonight. How are you feeling?" Thomas turned his head slowly toward her voice. His eyes were a pale blue, and despite his illness, they held a sharpness that surprised her. He was thin, his hospital gown hanging loose on his frame, but there was something dignified about the way he carried himself, even lying in that bed. "Been better," he said with a weak smile. His voice was raspy but warm. "You're new, I haven't seen you before. I usually work days, but I'm covering tonight. Is there anything you need right now? Pain medication, water, extra blankets?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "Just company, I suppose. Gets quiet in here at night. Too quiet to sleep. Too loud to rest, if that makes sense." Rebecca understood exactly what he meant. She'd heard similar words from hundreds of patients over the years. That restless space between wakefulness and sleep where worries grew larger and time moved differently. "I have a few other patients to check on, but I'll be back in about an hour. We can talk then, if you'd like." Thomas nodded, and Rebecca could see something in his expression, a mix of gratitude and loneliness that made her chest tighten slightly. As she made her rounds, checking on her other patients, Rebecca found herself thinking about Thomas. There was something about him that felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd asked for company so directly, without embarrassed at her. Really looked like meant. Maybe it was how he'd look he was trying to memorize her face. When she returned to his room an hour later, Thomas was still awake, still staring out the window. "Can't sleep?" she asked, pulling a chair closer to his bed. "Sleep and I haven't been on good terms lately," Thomas said. "Too many things on my mind, I suppose." Rebecca sat down, settling into the chair. Sometimes talking helps, if you want to share what's keeping you awake. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, and Rebecca didn't rush him. She'd learned that patients often needed time to find their words, especially when those words carried weight. Finally, Thomas turned to look at her directly. "Rebecca, that's your name, right? You seem like someone who keeps promises." "I try to," she said, unsure where he was leading. "I don't have much time left. The doctors told me today. Maybe a week, maybe less. My heart's just worn out, and there's nothing more they can do." Rebecca felt that familiar ache that came with these conversations. After 7 years, she still hadn't figured out how to make them easier. "I'm sorry, Thomas. Is there family I can call for you?" Thomas shook his head. "No family left? Lost my wife 3 years ago to cancer. Never had children. My brother passed last winter." He paused, looking back toward the window. "But there is something. Someone you need to find." "Who'd to find?" "Her name is Anna Caldwell. She'd be about 45 now, I think. Maybe 46. Thomas's voice grew softer, more careful. "I haven't seen her in over 20 years. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "Is she a friend? Someone from your past?" Thomas was quiet again, and Rebecca could see him wrestling with something. When he spoke, his words came slowly, like he was pulling them from somewhere deep and painful. "She's my daughter." Rebecca felt her breath catch. "Your daughter?" "But you said you didn't have children." "I said I never had children. I didn't say I never had a daughter." Thomas's eyes filled with tears that he tried to blink away. "I made mistakes, Rebecca. Big ones. When Anna was little, I wasn't the man I should have been. I drank too much, worked too little, and her mother, she did what she had to do. She took Anna and left when Anna was 5. What happened after that? I spent years trying to find them, but Sarah, Anna's mother, she was smart. She knew how to disappear when she needed to. By the time I got my life together, really together, it was like they'd vanished completely. I hired investigators, searched records, followed every lead. Nothing. Rebecca could hear the pain in his voice. Decades of regret compressed into those few sentences. The last time I saw Anna, she was this tiny thing with pigtails and a stuffed rabbit she called Mr. Buttons. She used to make me pretend to have tea parties with her and that rabbit. Thomas smiled through his tears. She had this laugh, Rebecca. This perfect little laugh that could make you forget every bad thing in the world. Do you know where she might be now? Thomas reached for the bedside table drawer with trembling hands. Inside, Rebecca could see a worn manila envelope. He pulled it out carefully, like it contained something precious. I never stopped looking, he said. Even after I met my wife, even after I thought I'd moved on, I kept searching month. I finally found something. Last. He opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. Photocopies of documents, printed emails, handwritten notes. A private investigator I hired found her about 6 weeks ago. She lives here in Virginia, actually. About 2 hours south of Richmond, in a town called Millfield. She works as a teacher at the elementary school there. She's married, has 2 kids of her own. Rebecca looked at the papers in his hands. Why didn't you contact her? Thomas's voice broke slightly. Because I'm a coward. Because 23 years is a long time to be absent from someone's life. Because I was afraid she'd hate me. Or worse, that she wouldn't remember me at all. But now I'm dying. and I realized that being a coward is the worst thing I could be. She desire I nevers to know that stopped thinking about her, that I never stopped loving her, that not a day went by when I didn't wonder if she was happy, if she was safe, if she still had that beautiful laugh. Rebecca felt tears forming in her own eyes. This was why she'd become a nurse. Not for the medical procedures or the technical skills, but for moments like this, when someone trusted her with their deepest pain and their most desperate hopes. "What do you want me to do, Thomas?" Thomas looked at her with those pale blue eyes, and Rebecca could see both fear and determination there. "I want you to help me write her a letter. I want you to help me find the words to tell her everything I should have said 23 years ago. And then, if you're willing, I want you to make sure she gets it." Rebecca reached out and gently took his hand. It was thin and cold, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "Of course I'll help you, Thomas. We'll make sure Anna knows how much her father loves her." As the night deepened around them, Rebecca pulled out a notepad from her pocket. She was about to become part of something much bigger than a routine nursing shift. She was about to help a dying man reach across decades of silence to touch his daughter's heart one last time. What neither Rebecca nor Thomas knew was that this simple promise would lead them both down a path that would change everything they thought they knew about love, forgiveness, and the power of a single act of kindness. Thomas squeezed Rebecca's hand as she positioned the notepad on her lap. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above them, and the distant sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Other nurses making their rounds, other patients fighting their own battles in the darkness. "Tell me about Anna," Rebecca said gently. "Help me understand who she was, who she is now, so we can write something that reaches her heart." Thomas closed his eyes, and for a moment, Rebecca thought he might have drifted off to sleep. But then he began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. She had these enormous brown eyes, just like her mother's. And she was curious about everything, always asking why the sky was blue, why birds could fly, why Daddy had to go to work. I used to get annoyed by all her questions back then. Thomas shook his head slowly. What I wouldn't give to answer just one more of her questions now. Rebecca began writing, capturing not just his words, but the emotion behind them. She could feel the weight of his regret, the depth of his love, and the urgency that came with knowing time was running out. She loved to draw, Thomas continued. Our refrigerator was covered with her pictures. Stick figures of our family, rainbows that took up entire sheets of paper, houses with crooked windows and smoke coming from chimneys that looked like cotton balls. Sarah used to say Anna saw the world in colors the rest of us had forgotten existed. What about now? What did the investigator find out about her current life? Thomas reached for the papers again, his hands trembling slightly. Anna Marie Caldwell. She kept my last name, even after everything. She married a man named David Chen 5 years ago. They have 2 children, Emma, who's 3, and baby Matthew, who's 8 months old. She teaches 2nd grade at Millfield Elementary. The investigator said the other teachers describe her as patient and creative, just like she was as a child. Rebecca felt her heart swell with both joy and sadness. Anna had built a beautiful life for herself, but Thomas had missed all of it. The graduations, the wedding, the births of his grandchildren, all those milestone moments that parents dream of sharing with their children. The investigator also found out something else, Thomas said quietly. Every year on my birthday, Anna makes a donation to the Children's Hospital Foundation. She's done it for the past 10 years. The investigator couldn't figure out why at first. But then he discovered something in her college records. What did he find? She wrote an essay for her education degree about why she wanted to become a teacher. In it, she mentioned that she'd always wondered if her father was still alive, and that if he was, she hoped he'd found peace. She said teaching children helped her feel connected to the little girl she used to be, before everything changed. Rebecca had to pause in her writing. The depth of Anna's compassion, even toward the father who had hurt her, was overwhelming. This wasn't just about delivering a letter anymore. This was about healing wounds that had been bleeding for over 2 decades. Thomas, what do you want to say to her? If you could sit across from Anna right now, what words would you choose? Thomas was quiet for several minutes. Rebecca could see him struggling, trying to distill 23 years of love and regret into something that could fit on paper. I want to tell her that leaving was the biggest mistake of my life, that I spent every single day missing her laugh, missing her questions, missing the way she used to fall asleep on my chest while I read her bedtime stories. I want her to know that I got sober, that I became the man I should have been for her, even though it was too late. Rebecca wrote carefully, making sure every word was exactly as Thomas intended. But most importantly, Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger, I want her to know that she turned out exactly as wonderful as I always knew she would, that I'm proud of the woman she became, the mother she is, the teacher she is, that even though I wasn't there to guide her, she found her way to kindness and love all on her own. As Rebecca wrote, she noticed something changing in Thomas's face. The lines of pain seemed to soften slightly, as if speaking these words out loud was already beginning to heal something inside him. Is there anything else? She asked. Yes, Thomas said. I want to tell her about her grandchildren, about how I know she must be an amazing mother because she learned to love so deeply despite being hurt so young. And I want her to know that if she can find it in her heart to forgive me, I'll be watching over her and her family from wherever I go next. Rebecca finished writing and looked up to see tears streaming down Thomas's cheeks. But they weren't tears of despair anymore. They were tears of hope, of love finally being spoken after years of silence. Do you think she'll read it? Thomas asked. I think any daughter would want to know that her father never stopped loving her, Rebecca said. But Thomas, there's something I need to ask you. What if Anna wants to see you? What if she wants to come here? Thomas's eyes widened. The possibility seemed to both terrify and thrill him. I don't know if I'm ready for that. What if she's angry? What if seeing me just opens old wounds? Rebecca set down her notepad and looked directly into his eyes. Thomas, you said you've been a coward for 23 years. Are you going to let fear win now, when you finally have a chance to make things right? Thomas nodded slowly. You're right. If Anna wants to see me, then I'll find the courage to face her. I owe her that much. Rebecca stood up and carefully tore the pages from her notepad. The letter was 3 pages long, written in her neat handwriting but containing Thomas's heart laid bare. She folded the pages carefully and placed them back in the manila envelope along with the investigator's report. I'll make sure Anna gets this, she promised. But Thomas, I need you to understand something. Once I send this letter, there's no taking it back. Anna's life is going to change when she reads these words. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Thomas looked out the window at the city lights one more time, then back at Rebecca. For the first time since she'd met him, his expression was completely peaceful. Rebecca, I've spent 23 years living with the pain of staying silent. I think it's time to find out what it feels like to live with the consequences of speaking the truth. As the first hints of dawn began to appear on the horizon, Rebecca tucked the envelope into her jacket pocket. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a series of events that would not only reunite a father and daughter, but would also test the very limits of what one person would do to keep a promise. The hardest part of Thomas's last wish wasn't writing the letter. It wasn't even finding Anna. The hardest part was what came next, and Rebecca was about to discover just how far she was willing to go to help a dying man make peace with his past. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope during her drive home that morning. The weight of Thomas's letter felt heavier than the paper it was written on. She kept glancing at it on her passenger seat, knowing that inside those pages was a father's desperate attempt to bridge 23 years of silence. When she reached her small apartment, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table and carefully wrote Anna's address on a fresh envelope. But as she sealed the letter inside, doubt crept into her mind. What if this caused Anna more pain than healing? What if Thomas's timing was selfish, dropping this emotional bomb into a woman's peaceful life just because he was dying? Rebecca had promised Thomas she would send the letter, but she hadn't promised when. She placed it on her kitchen counter and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thomas's face, the desperate hope in his pale blue eyes. 3 days passed. Rebecca worked her regular shifts, checking on Thomas each evening. His condition was declining rapidly. The doctors had adjusted his timeline from a week to perhaps 3 or 4 days, but Thomas never asked about the letter. He seemed to trust completely that Rebecca would honor her word. On Friday evening, Rebecca made her decision. She couldn't wait any longer. Thomas was running out of time, and if Anna was going to have any chance of seeing her father alive, the letter needed to reach her immediately. But Rebecca realized that simply mailing the letter wasn't enough. What if Anna was traveling? What if the letter got lost in the mail? What if Anna needed time to process before deciding whether to respond? Thomas might die before she even received it. That's when Rebecca made a choice that surprised even herself. She called in sick for her Saturday shift and drove the 2 hours to Millfield. The drive through Virginia's countryside gave her time to think about what she was doing. Was this crossing professional boundaries? Probably. Was she getting too emotionally involved with a patient? Definitely. But something deep inside told her this was bigger than hospital protocols. This was about giving a dying man peace and a daughter the chance to know her father's heart. Millfield was a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Rebecca found Millfield Elementary School easily, a modest brick building surrounded by playground equipment and carefully tended flower beds. She parked across the street and waited. At 3:15, children began pouring out of the building, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Rebecca watched the teachers saying goodbye to their students, and then she saw her. Anna Caldwell Chen was exactly as Thomas had described her in his stories about her childhood, but grown into a beautiful woman. She had those same enormous brown eyes, now warm and patient as she helped a struggling student with his backpack. Anna was petite, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple blue dress and comfortable flats, the kind of outfit that said she prioritized her students' needs over fashion. Rebecca could see kindness in every movement, the way she bent down to a child's eye level, the gentle way she guided them toward their parents. Rebecca sat in her car for 20 minutes, watching Anna organize her classroom through the windows, wondering how to approach her. Finally, she gathered her courage and walked to the school's main entrance. The secretary, a friendly woman in her 60s, looked up as Rebecca entered. "Can I help you? I'm hoping to speak with Anna Chen. It's about a family matter. Are you a relative?" The secretary's voice carried the protective tone of someone who'd learned to be cautious about unexpected visitors. "No, but I have information about her father that she needs to know." The secretary's expression shifted slightly. "Anna's father, I'll see if she's available." A few minutes later, Anna appeared in the hallway. Up close, the resemblance to Thomas was even more striking. She had his thoughtful eyes and the same way of tilting her head slightly when she was trying to understand something. "I'm Anna Chen. Mrs. Patterson said you have information about my father?" Rebecca's heart raced. "Yes, my name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm a nurse at Richmond General Hospital. Your father, Thomas Henley, is my patient." Anna's face went completely pale. She gripped the doorframe for support. "My father? Is he alive?" "Yes, but Anna, he's very ill. He doesn't have much time left." Anna stared at Rebecca for several long seconds, as if trying to process words that didn't seem real. After a moment, she gestured toward her classroom. "Can we talk privately?" They sat in tiny plastic chairs designed for 7-year-olds, surrounded by colorful posters and student artwork. Anna's hands were shaking as she folded them in her lap. "I haven't seen him since I was 5, Anna said quietly. "My mother and I left when I was little. She said he had problems, that it wasn't safe for us to stay." Rebecca pulled the envelope from her purse. "He asked me to give you this. He wanted you to know that he never stopped thinking about you, that he never stopped loving you." Anna took the letter with trembling hands but didn't open it immediately. She just held it, staring at her father's name written in Rebecca's handwriting. "Is he really dying?" "Yes. The doctors think he has maybe 2 or 3 days left. Anna, I know this is overwhelming, and I know you need time to process this, but if you want to see him, it needs to be soon." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can. I've spent my whole adult life wondering about him, but now that the possibility is real, I'm terrified." "What are you afraid of?" Anna wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What if he's still the same person my mother ran from? What if seeing him hurts more than not knowing? What if I go there and he dies while I'm standing there, and I have to carry that image forever?" Rebecca reached across and gently touched Anna's arm. "Those are all valid fears. But Anna, what if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering what he might have said to you?" Anna looked down at the letter in her hands. "What's he like now?" Rebecca thought carefully about her answer. "He's gentle, quiet, full of regret about the past, but not bitter about it. He talks about you like you're the most precious thing in the world. He remembers details about when you were little that most people would have forgotten." Anna finally opened the envelope with shaking fingers. As she read, tears streamed down her face. Rebecca watched her expression change from fear to sadness to something that looked like recognition. When Anna finished reading, she sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, she looked up at Rebecca. "He mentions my children in here. How does he know about Emma and Matthew?" "Thomas hired an investigator to find you. He's been searching for you for years, Anna. He knows you're a teacher, that you're married to David, that you have 2 beautiful children. He's incredibly proud of the woman you became." Anna folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "Rebecca, Why did you drive all the way here instead of just mailing this? Because I could see how much this meant to him, and I thought you deserved to have a choice about whether to see him while there's still time. Anna was quiet again, staring at the student artwork on the walls. Finally, she spoke. I need to call my husband. I need to arrange for someone to watch my kids, and I need to drive to Richmond tonight. Rebecca felt a surge of relief mixed with anxiety. Are you sure? Anna looked directly at her, and Rebecca could see Thomas's determination in her eyes. I've been angry at him for 23 years, but this letter, it shows me a man who's been punishing himself for 23 years to both of us to stop. Maybe it's time for carrying that pain. As they walked out of the school together, Anna paused. Rebecca, thank you for doing this. Thank you for caring enough about a stranger to drive 2 hours just to deliver a letter. Rebecca smiled. Sometimes we meet people who change our lives in unexpected ways. Your father is one of those people for me. What Anna didn't know was that her decision to see Thomas was about to set in motion a series of events that would test not just the bond between a father and daughter, but would also reveal the true depth of Rebecca's commitment to keeping promises, no matter what the cost. The drive back to Richmond would be the longest 2 hours of Anna's life, and for Rebecca, it would mark the beginning of the most challenging night of her nursing career. Anna called David from the school parking lot, her voice shaking as she tried to explain 23 years of silence suddenly breaking open. Her husband listened without interruption, then simply said he'd pick up the children from daycare and wait for her call. That's who David was, steady and understanding, never questioning when life demanded impossible choices. By 7 that evening, Anna was driving north toward Richmond, Thomas's letter folded carefully in her purse. Every mile brought a flood of memories she'd buried so deep, she'd almost convinced herself they weren't real. The tea parties with Mr. Buttons, her father's laugh when she'd tell him silly jokes, the way he used to carry her on his shoulders through the grocery store, making her feel like she could touch the ceiling. But other memories surfaced too. The raised voices late at night, her mother's tears, the morning they packed everything into garbage bags and left while he was sleeping, the way her mother's hands shook for weeks afterward, jumping at every unexpected sound. Anna pulled into Richmond General's parking lot at 9:30, her heart hammering against her ribs. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, staring at the hospital's lit windows, wondering which one might be his. Part of her wanted to turn around and drive home, to keep Thomas as the complicated memory he'd always been, rather than face whatever reality waited inside those walls. But Rebecca's words echoed in her mind. What if you don't go and spend the rest of your life wondering what he might have said to you? The hospital's night shift was quieter, just as Rebecca had described. Anna found herself at the information desk, asking for Thomas Henley's room with a voice that sounded strange to her own ears. The volunteer, a sweet elderly woman, gave her directions to the cardiac unit and wished her a pleasant visit, not knowing she was directing a daughter toward the father she hadn't seen in over 2 decades. Room 314 was at the end of the hallway. Anna stood outside the door for several minutes, listening to the steady beeping of medical equipment and trying to find courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Through the small window, she could see a figure in the bed, thin and frail under the white hospital sheets. She knocked softly and heard a weak voice say, "Come in." Anna pushed open the door and stepped inside. Thomas was awake, propped up against pillows, looking toward the window. When he turned and saw her, his face went through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Disbelief, recognition, joy, fear. and something that looked like relief. "Anna," he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. She stood frozen in the doorway, taking in the man who had haunted her thoughts for so long. He was smaller than she remembered, aged beyond his 67 years, but his eyes were the same pale blue from her childhood memories. "Hello, Dad," she said, and the word felt foreign after so many years of silence. Thomas started to cry, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "You came. I can't believe you actually came." Shaktiki film. Anna stayed with Thomas through the night, holding his hand as he shared stories she'd never heard and answered questions she'd carried for decades. They talked about her childhood, her children, her dreams, and slowly, carefully, about forgiveness. When Thomas passed peacefully at dawn, Anna was there. No longer the angry little girl who'd been abandoned, but a woman who'd found closure through understanding. Rebecca watched from the doorway as Anna kissed her father's forehead one final time. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't medical care or professional expertise. Sometimes it's simply caring enough to help two hearts find their way back to each other before time runs out. Love, forgiveness, and second chances don't always come when we expect them, but they come exactly when they're needed most.